Welcome to the Deep Dive. If you really want to get how American media narratives have been shaped and honestly reshaped over the last, 25, 30 years, you got to look at this one huge trend: media consolidation. And today, we're zooming in, doing a really specific analysis on the acquisition of major Black-owned media companies by, predominantly white-owned corporations.
Yeah, and it's critical to understand this isn't just a business story, it's deeply cultural. I mean, historically, these Black-owned outlets, newspapers, magazines, TV, they played this essential role. Truly profound. They were often the only platforms for news, for culture, for economic opportunities that just weren't available elsewhere. Generations built trust in them. So when these companies change hands, the implications for who controls the narrative, for representation, they're huge.
Exactly why we're doing this deep dive. Our mission today: give you the core facts distilled down. We want to quickly pull out the key financials, the strategic thinking behind these massive deals, and, the cultural fallout, so you can walk away really understanding how the control over cultural output has fundamentally shifted these past few decades. We're going to move pretty fast.
Let's jump right in with the transaction that basically set the benchmark for all of this. Okay, let's unpack maybe the most monumental one first. The sale of Black Entertainment Television, b.e.t.
Right, b.e.t. It's absolutely foundational here. Founded back in 1980 by Robert L. Johnson and Sheila Johnson, it grew incredibly fast, becoming the first TV network really focused on African-American audiences. Its growth was something else. It became a cultural touchstone very, very quickly.
And the sale itself, around the turn of the millennium, it wasn't just a big deal. It felt, seismic. Viacom Inc., which, is now part of Paramount Global, they're the ones who bought b.e.t. The announcement came November 2000, deal closed in 2001, really marked the start of this big consolidation era.
And what really stands out is not just that it was sold, but the price tag. The sheer financial weight, total transaction value was a staggering $3 billion. And remember, this wasn't simple cash, it was complex. About $2.3 billion in Viacom stock. Plus, they assumed $570 million in debt. That debt part, that's a really important detail in understanding the true valuation. Often gets overlooked.
Yeah, that debt piece makes the $3 billion figure even more significant, doesn't it? It really shows the premium Viacom put on getting that specific audience, that brand. And like you said, at the time, it was the largest sale of a Black-owned business in American history, ever. Plus, for the founder, Robert L. Johnson, the outcome was historic personally, too. He became the first African-American billionaire from that deal.
It's undeniably a story of huge entrepreneurial success, massive financial return, no question. But the significance goes way beyond personal wealth. That acquisition covered everything. The main cable network, b.e.t.com, b.e.t. Books, all the subsidiaries. It was a colossal transfer of, cultural real estate. And you have to figure, when a company pays that kind of money, $3 billion, the corporate mission for that asset fundamentally changes. It shifts from being mainly a cultural platform to being, a major revenue driver inside a global giant.
That's the core point, isn't it? That switch from cultural platform to corporate asset. The b.e.t. sale proved immediately that these weren't just culturally important properties. They were commercially massive, big league financial assets justifying huge corporate investment. Okay, so b.e.t. set the high bar. But now let's broaden out, because this trend wasn't just one huge cable deal. It really spread across the whole media ecosystem, legacy print, new digital streaming platforms, all happening within about 2 decades of that b.e.t. sale.
And if you look at the digital space, the speed of these acquisitions is, frankly, startling. Much faster. Take Tubi, for example. Founded much later, April 2014, by Farhad Massoudi and Thomas On Hicks. It quickly became a big name in that growing ad-supported streaming market.
And it got snapped up in just 6 years. That's a sharp contrast to BT's 20-year journey to its sale. Fox Corporation bought Tubi, April 2020, paid a hefty $440 million cash.
So what was Fox after there? Future market share, right?
Exactly. For Fox, it was all about aggressive growth in streaming, pure strategy. They got an instant major digital footprint and access to Tubi's, 25 million monthly active users back then. It was purely about quick scale audience data, fitting a very different corporate need than Viacom's move back in 2000.
Okay, now let's pivot. Let's talk about the publications that really defined Black culture for decades. Ebony and Jet, the legacy print giants. Founded by the legendary John H. Johnson, Ebony in 45, Jet in 51. These were more than magazines. They were like family albums, history books, cultural guides, immense cultural capital tied up in them. Irreplaceable, really. And that cultural weight makes their financial path particularly interesting and complex. The Johnson publishing assets, they were first sold in 2016, went to Clearview Group, a private equity firm. Now, the terms weren't disclosed, but just that change in ownership from a family business to an investment group that showed the consolidation pressure right there.
But there's a twist here, which is fascinating, a real counterpoint. Junior Bridgman, former NBA star, successful businessman, he actually acquired the assets again in December 2020, paid $14 million. Now, obviously not the $3 billion b.e.t. number, but his stated motivation was different: restore their place in black media. So it shows that while consolidation is dominant, these reacquisition efforts driven by culture, they're happening too.
And we see a similar pattern with digital news outlets. Take The Root, co-founded January 2008 by Henry Louis Gates Jr. It was acquired fairly early in its life, May 2015, by Univision Communications.
Right, terms undisclosed again. But Univision's motivation tells you a lot about the platform's value. It was clearly strategic for them to diversify beyond just Hispanic-focused content. They basically bought a ready-made, trusted voice reaching another key demographic.
So if you pull this all together, the numbers are pretty compelling. Just across the big public deals we've discussed, b.e.t, Tubi, that later Ebony and Jet sale, we're looking at, roughly over $3.5 billion in documented transaction value. It highlights this clear economic reality. Black media properties are incredibly attractive to big conglomerates looking for market share and cultural relevance. But the deeper question isn't just how much money, it's why. Why were buyers willing to pay these sums?
That's the crucial pivot, yeah. Why are these mainly white-owned corporations paying such premiums? In b.e.t's case, an industry-defining premium, what did they get that they couldn't just build from scratch?
Well, the number one driver is straight economics. Immediate market access. Pure and simple. You're talking about getting a direct line to African-American audiences. That group represents currently over $1.6 trillion in annual buying power in the U.S. alone. Buying an established channel like b.e.t. or a fast-growing platform like Tubi, it's just the quickest, most efficient way to tap right into that consumer market, instantly.
And beyond just the spending power, they were investing big in something less tangible: cultural capital, authenticity. Think about Ebony's legacy or the specific trust people had in the Roots voice. These properties built credibility over decades within Black communities. That kind of authentic connection, you can't just manufacture that. An outside corporation launching a new brand can't replicate it easily. So you're essentially paying for inherited trust.
You're buying the keys to a specific cultural conversation. And then, of course, there are the more tangible assets, the content libraries. When they acquire these companies, conglomerates get valuable back catalogs, strong brand recognition, intellectual property, all stuff they can repurpose, syndicate, leverage globally across their huge distribution networks. It helps justify those high price tags.
Okay, so we get the buyer side: money, market access, authenticity, content. But let's really look at the other side now: the complex impact on Black media ownership itself. Sure, these deals created huge financial wins for the founders, but what was the systemic cost, if you will?
The clearest cost is reduced independent ownership. Simple as that.
Yeah.
I mean, yes, Robert L. Johnson became the first Black billionaire, fantastic achievement. But every single time one of these flagship properties gets acquired, control shifts. It moves from independent, often community-focused hands into these larger, predominantly white-owned corporate structures. Ownership gets more concentrated. And with that comes the challenge of keeping editorial independence, maintaining cultural direction.
It creates this real tension, doesn't it? You've got the undeniable success, the financial returns, proof of economic empowerment for the entrepreneurs. Fantastic. But then you have the structural result: fewer major media outlets directly controlled by the community they primarily serve.
Exactly. And that tension plays out further down the line, too, in employment and leadership. Theoretically, being part of a huge company offers bigger budgets, more resources. But the reality of these acquisitions has been pretty mixed for Black media professionals hoping for, or trying to keep, executive leadership roles within the merged companies. Often the original founders and execs are eventually replaced by corporate managers who are more aligned with the parent company's broader goals, not necessarily the original mission.
So given how powerful this consolidation force is financially, it begs the question: is this trend just inevitable, unstoppable? Or are there real efforts pushing back, trying to restore independent ownership?
Oh, there's definitely pushback. It shows the story isn't over, it's still evolving. The case of Essence magazine. It's a perfect example of a successful reacquisition. Essence, founded in 1970, huge focus on African-American women.
Yeah.
It had been majority acquired by Time Inc. during that big consolidation wave in the 2000s.
Right, but the pendulum swung back on that one. January 2018, Richelieu Dennis, through his company Essence Ventures, he bought it back. It was explicitly framed as a reverse acquisition, a conscious move to bring it back under independent Black ownership after years inside a big conglomerate.
And we're seeing totally different models emerge, too, trying to avoid the corporate acquisition path altogether. Look at Revolt Media and TV. Founded 2013 by Sean Diddy Combs. When Combs sold his stake in June 2024, it didn't go to another media giant.
No, it went employee-owned. That's a really interesting move. It's a critical difference, right? It keeps control, keeps operational independence by putting the equity and the strategy directly with the people running it, deliberately staying outside that traditional corporate M&A game.
Exactly. So these examples, the deliberate buyback of Essence, Revolt's innovative employee ownership, they confirm that even with huge financial pressures and decades of consolidation, the story of Black media ownership is still dynamic. And new digital platforms, they're launching all the time, offering fresh chances for independent voices and control.
Okay, quick recap then. We've traced this arc from massive financial wins, that $3 billion b.e.t. sale, the $440 million Tubi deal, to the consolidation of really vital cultural institutions like Ebony, Jet, Essence, the route into these huge corporate umbrellas.
Yeah, the whole dynamic is incredibly complex, profoundly so. These multi-billion-dollar deals, they absolutely prove the commercial power, the immense market value of Black-oriented media, no doubt. But at the same time, they really highlight the ongoing struggle over community control of its own stories, its own narratives, and the critical need to maintain independent editorial voices in what's becoming an ever more consolidated global media world.
So here's the final thought to leave you with, something to really mull over. Considering the huge financial potential shown by these billion-dollar deals and the clear appetite big corporations have for these assets, how can new Black-owned media ventures possibly balance that urgent need for capital, for investment, for growth, with the absolutely critical goal of holding on to independent ownership in this intensely consolidated global environment? That's the knot. That's the challenge looking forward.